Hello, everybody. Welcome to SOUNDWAVE, where we are changing the world and transforming it one voice at a time. Welcome to Own Your Conversation. Now, this is a series created for all of you out there, all you SOUNDWAVE Global coaches, all of you who have done your assessments, all of you who are SOUNDWAVE fans, and of course, for those of you who somehow got into this channel and is just wondering what is this all about? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a series for everyone who wants to learn all about what SOUNDWAVE is all about, the strategies, the tips, and the tricks, and how to skillfully use our voices to target our talk and engage and influence people around us. And as we say here in SOUNDWAVE, amazing things happen between people when the quality of their conversations is good. And when that happens, obviously, we will have the capability and the skills to be able to shift the dialogue, change the conversation, and shape the culture and shape the outcomes in the way that we intended to. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Pong, and I am the global partner for SOUNDWAVE. And together with me this morning, or wherever you are this afternoon, or somewhere in between, well, hosting this program together with me is none other than the creator of SOUNDWAVE himself, Mr. SOUNDWAVE, Kevin Eyre. A really, really good morning to you, Kevin. Is it cold where you're calling in from right now?
Yeah, at this time of year, Kim Pong, it's a little warmer this morning. It's wet and warm, so we bounce around between close to zero this time of year and then getting up to maybe as high as 11 or 12 degrees. So we don't have extremes. We have that wonderful temperate climate, so we can survive most of the year without getting too hot or too cold. But it's lovely to be here. Nice to see you again.
Yeah. I mean, I had an incredible morning today, and it's in the afternoon right now here in Singapore. I had an incredible morning today, and I must tell you, I give you fair warning here, Kevin. You probably have to anchor this whole session over the next 30 minutes or 40 minutes because I'm dead beat right now. I'm really tired. So if I'm rambling and talking nonsense, please pull me back. Please pull me back.
Okay, I'll do
All
that.
right. So let's get started, right? Once again, I'm going to surprise you with another quote. And this one is coming from somebody that I really, really admire and I really, really like. And this guy is called Dale Carnegie. I'm sure you've heard of who Dale Carnegie is. And he said this, right? He said, any fool can criticize, complain, and condemn. And most fools do. But it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. That's from Dale Carnegie. So today we are talking about the voice of critique, and we are getting into the session where we are talking about the third cluster of all the three different cluster of voices: the ask, the suggest, and the tell. And the tell, essentially, if you recall, there are three different voices to that. There is the critique voice, there is the correct voice, and then finally there is the challenge voice. Now, this is part of the 10 part series of Own Your Conversation. We're talking about all the verbal strategies, and today we are focusing on the voice of critique. So looking at this quote here, Kevin, does this have any semblance to what we are talking about today? The voice of critique.
It does but we have to begin by looking at the accentuated form of critique, which is to criticize. And I think Dale Carnegie makes an important point there and we sort of know this in our everyday language. It is easy to criticize. It is easy to complain. It is easy to point out all the failings in what somebody else or some other group of people might think or might be doing. And we might come back to the accentuated form of the voice to criticize in a while. But I think probably the starting point is to begin by trying to understand precisely what the voice of critique is, because to critique is not to criticize.
Now I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a really, really important definition, important differentiation, right? That critique is not criticized. I'm sorry, go ahead. I just thought I wanted
No, that's exactly. And I'm glad you've played that back, because I think it is the really important thing to recognize. And maybe I will just stay with criticism for a minute, so we just deal with it. So criticism is tricky. Okay, criticism is tricky. Now, I speak here from personal experience, Kim Pong, because to critique, I think, is my second strongest voice in my SOUNDWAVE profile. And I know, and I have to, there's a certain amount of disclosure here. I know that I can move from to critique, to criticize. And I think in one of our earlier conversations, I've mentioned that in first doing Soundwave, I became aware of this tendency, and it forced me to reflect a little bit on this propensity that I have. Now, I think people tend to criticize, and I know I tend to criticize when we're feeling insecure, when we're feeling vulnerable, when we're not feeling particularly good about ourselves. And so when we're not feeling good about ourselves, we tend to view other people in a less negative light than we probably should. And so it becomes easy to criticize. And the problem with criticism is that nobody enjoys being on the receiving end of it. It's
Yeah.
really, really damaging. I don't like to receive it, but at times I might like to give it, because in giving it, essentially I'm diminishing the other person, which if I'm not feeling very great about myself, brings them down to my level. It doesn't take me up to their level. So there is a sort of word of warning, I think, a caution with which we start this session today, is that there aren't many circumstances in which criticizing is a good thing to do, but there are many occasions when critiquing is an excellent thing to do. And I really would invite our participants in this session to bear that thought in mind. And I'm sure they recognize it in and of themselves in any case.
Yeah.
So I hope that differentiation works. Does that work for you, Kim Pong?
Well, yeah, it does, right? And I think there's one thing that you said that particularly caught my attention, right? And that is that when people are insecure and if they're using the critique voice, I think subconsciously or even maybe intentionally, criticism become the call of the day. And I'm just wondering that, hey, look, if we actually are secure and our intention is good and we are skillful in the use of the critique, I think using the critique voice, I think that would be drastically different from the unintended effects of criticizing. And one of the things I want to kind of check in with you, Kevin, is simply this. And this is a question that we often talk about all the time. In a world without critique, well, let me just backstep a little bit here. The critic voice is what we call a socially risky voice. So when you use
Yeah.
it, people are very sensitive to it. People kind of pick it up right away. And yet it's such a needed voice. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is this, Kevin. If critique is used well, how would the world we live in, or how would the community that we are part of, or the teams that we are leading, or people that we're working with, how would they benefit from the skillful, impactful use of the voice of critique?
So I think they benefit in a number of direct ways, Kim Pong. One is, and it's a really important one, is about coming to better judgments and decisions. So at some point, all of us, whether it's our private lives or our professional lives, we're inundated with choices, with possibilities, with opportunities. Which do we select? Which direction do we move in? What's the best thing to do? The voice of critique is a slightly dispassionate voice. We sort of have to stand back from the flow of events and rationally evaluate what is going on.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit in a previous session about the voice to diagnose having sort of quite a strong cognitive element. Contrast that with advocacy, which comes all from the heart. I think the voice to critique is another of these heady voices, these cognitive voices. It's slightly more analytical in the way in which it operates. And in its simplest term, it's about making choices, evaluations. So on the one hand, this, on the other hand, that. And that's an important dimension to it. So your earlier question, or half question, I think, which is going to be, what's the world like if we don't have their critiquing voice? It's a world in which we might make a whole series of very poor judgments.
Yeah.
It's a world in which we might not get to clear decisions. It's a world in which we might not have really evaluated the risks or the opportunities around us. It's really vital. Now, so let me pause there for a second. Yeah, so I think that's what it's about. It plays a major role in helping us to decide what to do and how and where to move forward.
Yeah. I mean, as I was listening to you, Kevin, and you talk about the critic voice being a more intellectual voice. But I cannot help but impute that while that may be true, isn't the critic voice has a lot to be influenced by the heart. Because if you talk about, say, things like being insecure, sometimes it's not just about being logic, or it's the logic that makes us insecure, but it's how we are feeling about the situation, how we are feeling about the response that people are on us, that causes us to go from critique to criticism. So isn't there a place for the heart, for the voice of critique?
Well, I think there's a place for the heart in all of our communications. I think fundamentally that's what
Yeah,
communication, certainly conversation,
yeah.
is really about. How confident are we in expressing who we are and
Mm-hmm.
disclosing the issue in front of
Mm-hmm.
us, in expecting some reciprocity back from people, which is sort of acknowledges the fact that we're disclosing important parts of ourselves. But I think my earlier point, Pong, is that some of the negative feelings we might have about ourselves or about other people can lead us to move away from good critique into criticism. And in a sense, we've gone from our heads into the darker part of our heart, if I can put it in those terms. Back to where we started, critique is not criticism. I mean, critique is a very constructive, positive way of evaluating opportunities and options. It still remains, as you pointed out at the beginning of this session, Kim Pong, a risky voice, because the movement from critique to criticism is very small. And people who are on the receiving end of critique can, of course, interpret the critique as a type of criticism. And then and we are aware of this. You often hear people say things like, "I don't wish to criticize, but." Now,
Mm.
when they say that, what they're probably trying to say to people is, "I'm actually not going to criticize, I'm going to critique. I'm going to provide a
Mm.
rational, balanced judgment,
Mm.
assessments from my point of view
Mm.
about the good and the bad, the important, the unimportant in any situation." But you're going to hear this, and depending on how you're feeling about yourself, you might hear more negatives than positives, even though I'm trying to find a reasonably balanced assessment. And I have to say, balanced assessment here is not a fabricated or have as many good things as bad things.
Yeah.
Okay. Good critique doesn't aim for balance just because it's socially the right thing to do. It aims for really good assessment or judgment about the issues and the facts in any given situation. So I want to give a good example of that in a second, Kim Pong.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give you a bit of space here.
Sure. I mean, well, thanks for that, Kevin. And I know that we're talking about critique, and I think invariably we are talking a lot about, I guess, the accentuated form, which is criticizing or criticism. I want to get back to the good sides very quickly, but I just need to ask this question here, because what caught my attention in your sharing just now was that the distance between critique and criticism is that small, and that makes it that socially risky voice, easily misunderstood, easily overplayed. So my question is this: for people who has the preferred voice of critique, what should they be looking out for to ensure that they don't jump that gap so quickly and they're unaware about that? What would your thoughts be on the triggers, on the things to look out for?
Well, I think that anybody who knows they have a strong preference for the voice to critique, and I would be one of them, has as a default style of operating to alert people to what is coming, almost irrespective of what they're seeing or what they're sensing or what they're hearing in the way other people respond. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've used the term sound posting several times
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
and it's worth saying things like, okay, I'm going to assess this situation. I want to point out the things here that I think are helpful, the things that are unhelpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I want us to hear it in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, or even that classic expression, this is going to sound like I'm criticizing. I'm not criticizing. I'm going to critique. I want us to get to a good judgment of this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I think that as an assumption for operationalizing the voice, that's a good thing to do, because it's recognizing that, because as you say, that gap between the critique and the criticize is so small, and we don't always automatically know how somebody's feeling in that moment about the conversation that's taking place. We might have a sense of it if we look carefully and if we listen hard, we will hear what the sort of emotional state that somebody is likely to be in, and so we'll make a better judgment about it.
Yeah.
But I think there's an obligation on the voice to critique, to protect other people at the starting point. And the reason for that is it will help people hear more of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
They won't automatically be defended from
Mhm.
what is coming. It's worth pointing out, Kim Pong, that critique is one of the 3 least preferred voices in the general population.
Mm.
We are quite sensitive to this. We don't like it when it's coming at us as a criticism. And I think possibly we're also not quite as good at distinguishing what is critique from criticism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's whether I'm delivering it or whether I'm receiving it. There's a voice in my head asking, what is this that's coming at me at the moment? How am I meant to interpret this? How do
Yeah.
I get myself to a place where I hear it with the constructive intent,
Yeah.
which is meant to be behind it? It's quite a challenge for people to
It is.
do.
It is. And Kevin, I do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of training, and I'll get my team together and say, let's have some good feedback. Let's have some good critique on what just happened. And I must confess that it takes a lot of energy on my part to muster up the courage to face the critique, because my natural response to a person's critique, whether it's good or bad, I mean, it's not even criticism, it's just critique. It's just telling you what went well, what didn't go so well, what was good about it, what was not good about it, what's the pros and cons, the positives and the negatives. The fact that people are telling me this, I need to put up, all the bulwarks, if I can use that, to
Yes.
prevent myself from becoming defensive.
That's
And this is a little bit counterintuitive when I say that. It's like, to be open to a person's critique, it takes a lot from someone like me. I guess that underscores exactly what you just said, because it's a socially risky voice. There is a lot of need, I guess, right, to be really skillful in this voice, because people are just really sensitive about this voice.
That's right. And so if I can take that as a cue, Kim Pong,
Mm.
what is a good example of the really skillful use of this voice? Now,
Yeah.
my reference point here, and it's accessible to anybody, is to pick up a quality journal or newspaper
Mm.
and go to the section called Film Critics.
Mm.
Okay. And obviously you can get bad, poorly written critical reviews of movies.
Mhm.
This film is rubbish. This film is great. Okay. But where you get a good review or critique, you get a critique of movies by film critics. The language is slightly unhelpful because they're not really critics, they're critiquers. And the way they master the critique is to contextualize it. They don't say, as does Rotten Tomatoes, I'll give this 4 tomatoes out of 5, and don't go near the thing or go near the thing. Firstly, they contextualize it. They say, well, this is the 3rd film by the combination of this director and producer. Their previous films include, they're working again with the following actors. There's a theme which resonates with their previous movies, but actually this is a departure from the previous movies in the sense that it incorporates the following new things. Okay? Now, the moment that context is laid out, what then follows, the sort of the evaluative nature of the review, actually is far less crunchy than it otherwise would be. The contextualization is really helpful. So if I bring that into everyday life, let's imagine that 2 people working together are doing something new for the first time and that it goes okay, but it's not brilliant. Okay. And they both know that. So they're going to sit down and review it. A really important piece to make the critique land is to start with the context, which is, okay, let's begin by recognizing
Yeah.
today was the first time. We've not rehearsed this. We've not practiced it. We
Mhm.
knew it was going to be a little bit risky. And
Yeah.
so there are bound to be things here that didn't work well. So
Mhm.
let's look at this through that perspective. Okay.
Oh,
Now, the moment that contextualization is done, defenses are lower and it becomes much easier actually to be harsher, to be actually closer to being critical than critiquing. And then you get the real power of the voice.
yeah. Kevin, thank you so much, right? Because I think that perspective is so liberating. I think for me, possibly the reason why very often I feel defensive about people's critique, no matter how well intentioned it is that people just dive right in and just give it to you, right? Just say, hey, yes, here's what it is, right? And I'm going to try this with my team. I'm going to get back to them and say, hey, guys, before you give me any critique, please have some contextualization. Kind of bring the walls down a little bit
That's
for
great.
me. I know, no. So I'll let you know next week, right, as to how well it has worked. Because, I mean, it is true. It is true. I mean, when you said that, it just reminded me of all those different situations I spent with my team in critiquing, in receiving their critique because I invite that. I invite them
Yeah.
to give me open, direct critique, and I guess we miss out on the contextualization piece here. Now, I want to flip the question around here. Critique is such an important voice, and it's the voice of judgment. It's a voice of decision. It helps us make great decisions, great judgment here. So my question to you is, for someone, not just like me, but for someone who is hearing the voice of critique, what should we do to be more open to receive the critique of people, whether they have contextualization or not? How do we prepare ourselves to be actually listening to the critique of people?
So a number of things. I think this resonates well with what you were just saying, Kim Pong, about what you might ask for. I mean, our mantra here in Soundwave, and it's on the screen at the moment, is own your conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the great example of how you can own your conversation, you take personal responsibility for managing the critique that's coming in your direction. And you
Mm.
can take personal responsibility by doing the thing that you just suggested you're going to do, which you can say, hang on. Before you continue, just provide me with a bit of context here. How do you see what you're about to tell me as fitting into the overall scheme of work that we've been involved in? Just contextualize. Okay.
I love it.
Now you're doing that. You are owning your conversation.
Yeah. All
Okay.
right.
You are rising to the challenge because you know that a technique of that sort is going to help you receive the critique more clearly and you'll be more effective.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do, and I think you've implied that you already do this, is just go through a little mental process of saying, look,
Mhm.
with your inner voice, be open to what's coming. Just let it land, quietly accept it and process it, and come to your own evaluation of the evaluation that's coming to you. Okay, so there's a really important piece of inner processing about what goes on. And that also is, I think, a good example of you owning the conversation. Only it's a conversation with yourself
Yeah.
rather than a conversation which is externally oriented.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that sharing because it just helps me understand a whole lot more of what I can do to ready myself, to prepare myself for that critique. And I love the fact that you reminded us of that strap line that we use all the time, right? Own your conversation. It's about, hey, what's the quality in a conversation that you want to extract out from that interaction there. So yeah, that's cool. I want to move on right now to the personas and the metaphors, Kevin. And after that, and I want to talk a little bit about the passive voice of critique here. So really quickly, personas of the critique voice. What personas do you think would befit this voice of critique?
Well, I've mentioned the film critic,
Yeah.
which I think is at the sort of more sophisticated end of good critique.
Hmm.
Um, I think a more everyday example would be the sports pundit.
Okay.
So you see them everywhere. Occasionally, I guess my favorite sport is soccer, football
Oh
in
my God,
England.
what a surprise! What a surprise! Oh my
Yeah, I know.
God. Sorry, sorry. Just to make sure that people are on the right side with you. Who is your team?
I'm a slightly lapsed Chelsea supporter, which is
Ah,
a London team. Uh, I prefer to look at but I live in the city of Bristol, so
yeah.
I sort of support Bristol
Well,
City.
Kevin, I'll just tell you one of my colleagues, Dina, if she hears you saying about Chelsea, she's gonna give you a thumbs down.
Really, does she have a preferred team?
I think she likes the team that wears red, if I'm correct. We shall not mention the name here.
Uh, yeah, probably no. We won't mention that. We won't mention that. Okay, let's get back to the
The
serious part of
personas,
this.
the personas, yes.
Yes, so sports pundits, you see sports pundits, there's a sort of an analytical quality. They'll play back a section of, an attack by a team, and they'll tell you what's happening. And in the process of telling you what's happening, they'll tell you what worked well and what didn't work well.
Yeah.
So he moved the ball forward to the attacker on the left. Actually, look, here the arrows on the screen. There were three other options. He decided not to take those three other options. And this is critique. And then you might occasionally hear one of them say, and it's about time that forward Kim Pong Lim retired. He's just too old for the game now. And then we're starting to get to, a little more criticism, a little more
Yeah.
personal, a little more attacking. So that would be my other good example here.
That's a great.
I do. Sorry, go ahead, Kim Pong.
No, I was supposed to say that's a great example because I don't think I would typically think about a sports pundit as a critique voice, but the way you express it just now, it makes perfect sense. It is a critique voice. It is a critique voice.
There's a couple of other things about this voice I just really want to point out. The one is I think it's really important for learning. To learn well, we have to be open to the feedback that other people are giving us.
Mm-hmm.
And so failure to work with critique is partly a failure to learn all that is possible to learn.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think that's one thing. The other thing is more of a societal level point. I think that the importance of the critiquing voice is sort of lost in a world where we think it's important not to offend or not to disagree with other people's opinions.
Yeah.
I think in Soundwave, we take the view, of course, you can disagree with other people's opinions. And what's helpful to that is to apply facts to the case and consider the facts of a situation. And certainly in recent years in the model world, we've got too used to the notion of good argument being shot down because it's fake news. Actually, it might not be fake news. It may just be fact. So the statement, it's fake news, is to deny the relevance of critique. And critique is vital for learning and progress in human society.
I love
so we have to take this voice seriously and really work with it, be a really good deliverer of critique and a really exceptional receiver of critique.
Yeah, and it's no surprise, right? When you talk about this, that the critique voice is at the bottom three of most preferred voices compared to all the nine, right? And that tells us something that I think for many of us, we literally got to be very intentional about drawing the critique voice out of our bag here and learn how to use it. Well, we're still on the topic of persona, Kevin. So we have done the sports pundit, we've done the reviewer. I remember there's one time you talked to me about the jagged rock as a metaphor. Now, for the life of it, I have no idea what you're talking about. What's a jagged rock? And so I just moved from persona to metaphor, right? As you can.
You did.
But you talk about a jagged rock as a metaphor for the critique here. Now, what in the world is that?
Well, I had a sort of poetic expression, which is that in the terrain of talk, critique is the jagged rock of experience. And I think what I mean by that is that actually to transverse it, to walk across it is tricky, but actually at the same time, it's very beautiful to observe. Jagged rocks with their angles, their shapes, the difference of light, darkness, lightness, changing movement as the sun moves across the rock. It is often a beautiful thing to behold, much more interesting, much more fascinating than the flat surface of a rock. Okay. But of course, the risk is you might fall on one of the jagged points and hurt yourself. And so that's the idea. It's the jagged rock. It comes with many benefits. It comes with a lot of risk. And therein lies the power that it has. I mean, I'm really excited about the voice to critique. I think it has, generally speaking, across the population, unrealized potential as a voice. What would society be like if actually we're all really, really skillful at delivering and receiving this voice? How much more would we learn? How much more focused would we be on pulling real facts together and working with them? How much more confident would we become because we can process this stuff? I think it has unrealized potential.
I love that. I love that metaphor of the jagged rock, the beauty, the danger, the disruption in thought, right? Through the jagged rock feature. I love that. Well, I have a simpler metaphor, Kevin. I'm not as poetically inclined as you are. I'm a simple man, with simple needs. I wear a sweatshirt where you wear a jacket. To me, a simple metaphor would be that of a scale, right? Or a balance. It kind of weighs the options. It kind of decides on, which is the one that we want to take, which is heavier, which is lighter. And then if I try to be poetic, then I'll say, look, you'll be coming from the movie The Matrix, when Morpheus was talking with Neo, and he was offering him the options. Would you take the red pill, or would you take the blue pill? So to me, I think that is critique. It is about, comparing options, comparing decisions side by side, and then, to be really intentional and being really open and logical about it and say, okay, which is the best decision that we have taken? Which is the thing that we did that was not so good? What can we do? What can we change? So that's my metaphor, Kevin. Whole lot simpler than your jagged rock.
No, it's a really good one. And actually it conjures in my mind sort of another metaphor or practice. I mean, again, all of I imagine just about everybody who's listening to this today in their professional lives would have been involved in something called a SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and strengths. Well, that's a tool for critique. That's a tool for evaluation. That's a way of processing ranges of possibilities in pursuit of formation of a strategy. And it's contextualized because the context is we're going to think about our strategy. And because we're clear about that context, you bring in all of the things you think in relation to these categories. So it's another simple way in which in a management context, a professional context, we might be exercising this voice. Okay. So, and of course that process drives very rich conversation, very deep insight, very often.
Kevin, I'm going to ask you a tough question. So, I think it's the same in your part of the world. I think it's the same in my parts of the world. So when we are actually working with our leaders, people who are leading us, people who are supervising us, I think you would agree with me that sometimes to critique what our leader do is actually quite difficult and quite challenging. And I dare say sometimes quite unnerving. And yet in the absence of critique, bad things do happen. So the question, that I have for you here is this: what do you think people could do to critique what they see their leaders are doing or what their leaders are talking about or proposing? How do you help people find their voice of critique in such a relationship?
So, thank you for that question, Kim Pong. I suppose the first thing to say is it depends a little bit on the authority inside the relationship. How hierarchical is that relationship? Do we have to use some old-fashioned language, do we have a very clear boss subordinate relationship, or do we have something which is a little more collegial? That would make a difference to what's said. But
Excellent.
actually, one of the techniques that it's possible to use is to start with oneself.
Hmm.
So, so if you believe it is important for the boss to understand that there are some things that they're doing that might need to be done differently,
Mhm.
but you don't want to give direct feedback because you don't think that's going to be heard. Excuse me. Then start with yourself and say, hey, look, in this situation that we're dealing with here, I've reflected. I think I've done a couple of things well. I think there are a few things I need to improve at. I don't know what you think about me and my evaluation here. I'm also wondering what you think. I'm
Mhm.
wondering if what are the things that you think have worked well, and what are the things you think you might need to do
Mm,
different,
mm,
better.
mm, mm.
Now, you would never use quite that language,
Yeah.
and I have to say there is some risk for some people in doing that. Not
Yeah.
all people will be receptive. Um, and going upwards with this is the more difficult. It's easier to go sideways. It's much easier to go down.
Hmm.
Um, but some bosses are very open to that possibility.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, at the end of the day, Kevin, I mean, you are right, right? If the environment is collegial, psychological safety is good, I guess it makes that task a whole lot easier. But I guess
Yes.
the situation I'm asking about is really in situations where people feel that, hey, I could see the rights and wrongs about this proposal here, but I do not dare to speak up. Maybe maybe the relationship with the boss may not be such so psychologically safe for something like this, and yet that voice of critique must hold, right? Or should hold. Um, and actually, when you were talking just now, it gave me an idea, right? Which is, I thought it was a pretty smart idea, and I guess I'll coin my own way. It's called a reverse critique. So instead of me telling you about what's going on, it's like, hey, well, what you just told me about this, what we have done as a team together, would you do it any differently, or would you change any of what you're doing? I thought that way it's a lot more softer. It's a lot more it's a lot more indirect, right? When you're doing the critique here. So I love that. I'm watching time here, Kevin, and it's almost to the wire. So the final word from the genius creator of Soundwave here. And I know we have talked about all this, right? But if there's one best advice that you can give to people who is struggling to use the voice of critique, what is your best advice?
So this is somebody, Kim Pong, who would have the voice of the low level in their profile. Um, they don't use the voice very often. I think I think the starting point is for a little bit of self-evaluation again. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? The questions to ask are, what are you nervous of? Okay, what are you nervous of? And how will you overcome that nervousness? Because I think most people, not everybody, but most people are capable of critiquing. They're certainly capable of identifying what's wrong or what they don't agree with. And I think that's a starting point. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think the starting point is to understand what it is that's preventing you
Mm-hmm.
from wanting to deliver them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you have to do that first, or you won't get to the point where you can start to practice the use of voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth, and I suppose the other thought here is that for some people, is that they have been brought up either in a family environment or a work environment surrounded by criticism.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
they don't actually know what critique is. They haven't really thought about it, and so they're stuck in a place of thinking, "Well, I've got to criticize, so the best I can do is to tell them that I'm
Mm-hmm.
about to criticize, not to take it personally."
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
people will take it personally,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then once there's some awareness of what they have to overcome, then they can start practicing, and the practicing starts with, "Let me contextualize."
Mm-hmm. You are so spot on this. That if I grew up in a family and it's all about criticism, it is less likely that I'm going to use that voice because I'm just full of that. And I
That's
think
right.
this is really about the intentionality of recognizing the power of the voice and not let it be diminished by bad practices, but it's
Yeah.
about reining that voice and using it really, really well for better judgment, for better decisions. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you for listening in on us. And of course, to my dear friend Kevin, thank you very much for co-hosting and sharing your wisdom and your insights on the voice of critique. So make sure that you join us next week, because next week we're going to be talking about, one of the other really socially risky voice, and that voice is the voice of correct. So with that, everyone, thank you very much for this morning, this afternoon, this evening's time. Kevin, thanks again. Have a great day. Oh, by the way, I believe you got a bowler hat somewhere, right? Could you put that on if you could? I think people would love to see an Englishman with a bowler hat.
Well, it's not a bowler hat.
Oh, it's not a bowler hat. I'm so sorry. It's a Harry Street hat.
All right.
Amazing. All right, cool. Adios, my friend. Take care. Bye-bye.